I hope everybody is doing well. So, on the behalf of the entire Economics Association, I welcome you all to our first session of Alumni Inspire series, where we connect our prestigious alumni with our students so that they can provide a guiding path in their respective field. And the theme for today's session is public policy initiatives. Now, before I introduce our speaker, I would like to introduce our Economics Association. The economics department of Sri Venkateswara College is one of the most highly regarded academic units in the University of Delhi and has not only produced a dynamic set of alumni, but has also seen great academicians and scholars grace the corridors of the college as professors. Apart from the academics, the department's day-to-day functioning as an administrative and extracurricular unit is handled by the Economics Association. The Economics Association of Sri Venkateswara College is a group of dynamic individuals committed to ensuring the smooth functioning of the departmental operations, activities, and events. Managed by the Students of Economics Department under the purview of the teaching faculty, it oversees a wide range of fields, from the conduction of academic seminars and alumni sessions to the hosting of inter-college competitions. To smooth functioning, the association has a highly organized structure spread across departments ranging from marketing to sponsorship, each led by secretaries who are in turn supervised by the senior core team. The association also organizes the annual fest of the economics department, that is Bliss Point, a well-recorded event in the undergraduate circuit. And our speaker for today is Miss Priyanka Bajaj, ma'am, who is a central banker since 2014. She is currently working in the Department of Economic and Policy Research of the Reserve Bank of India. She has first-hand experience in modeling and forecasting the agricultural sector production and prices and production, providing policy notes on the food prices for monetary policy. Strategy meetings. Her recent research work has been on demographic dividend, distributional consequences of monetary policy, rural demand slowdown, and has presented papers in both national and international fora. She holds a master's degree in economics from Delhi School of Economics and has worked as an actuarial analyst before joining the Reserve Bank of India. Now, I would like request our teacher in charge, Dr. Brahma Reddy sir, to say a few words.
Thank you, Naman. A very good morning to you all. A very good morning to you all. Today we have with us Priyanka Bajaj, one of our economics alumnus. She passed out in 2009, and soon after that she joined DSC for her master's MA Economics, and she worked for some years in corporate, and at present she is working with the Central Bank of India, that is Reserve Bank of India. We should do a program with her so as to enable our students to understand various career choices that she made and why she made, and ultimately she ended up with Central Bank of India. Although this is not the end, she may be moving forward as and when she get good opportunities. She is going to speak to us on unconventional monetary policy during pandemic. After that, she is going to discuss with you various career options that are available today to you all, both in corporate sector and public service. Along with me, we also have our esteemed faculty members from the Department of Economics. I see Dr. Krishna Kumar, he is there, and a few more faculty are expected to join. So we welcome you back to your alma mater, Priyanka. After almost a decade, you are coming to interact with us. I hope you too enjoy interacting with this young and budding economists. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, Naman. Yeah. So you can go ahead with.
Ma'am, you can go ahead.
Yeah.
So, very good morning, everyone. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, it's a truly an amazing feeling, and I feel immensely honored to be back to my alma mater after nearly 12 years. And thank you very much, Brahma Reddy sir, for giving me this opportunity. You have always been a great source of encouragement for your students. So, as already mentioned, I passed out Venkateshwara College in 2009, after which I pursued my master's from D School. I worked at a couple of places in private sector in Delhi University as well before I joined RBI in 2014 as an economist. And since then, I'm working in the same department there. So, of all these years, I could recollect 3 years at Venkateshwara College will always be the most cherished years of my life. And I think for anyone that would be true, the college time is the best time. And I never got the chance before, but today I would totally like to take this opportunity to thank all my teachers at Venkateshwara College, Brahma Reddy sir, KK sir, and Padma Rao, Suresh ma'am, Aruna Rao ma'am, and all the other teachers. A very sincere thank you for the significant contribution that you continue to make in the life of your students. And I'll be always grateful for the prominent role that you have played in making me what I am today. So,
Pleasure with an art.
sorry?
Can the people please mute off because so much of noise is coming. Please switch off your mobile so that the speaker is audible. Sorry, Priyanka.
So, before I take more time, let me start with the topic of the day. Then we can come back to the questions at the end of this end of the presentation. So, my screen is visible.
Yes. Yeah.
Slides are visible,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Okay. So,
Yes.
the topic given to me is the unconventional monetary policy during the pandemic time, and this is the structure of my presentation today. I'll start with the objective of the monetary policy, followed by the monetary policy transmission process and its relevance. And then we'll discuss the various tools and instruments that a central bank has in its kitty, which it can use to ensure this transmission happens and the monetary actions are converted into real economy changes. So there are some, we covered the conventional tools and instruments first before coming to the unconventional tools which have been used recently in last 2 to 3 years. So coming to the monetary policy objective, it's important to appreciate that monetary policy in India has transformed and it has evolved over time and very much in accordance with the changing character of the economy. So if you recall that there was an oil price shock in 70s, so in 1980s, the objective of the policy became price stability. Followed by in 90s, we started targeting the monetary aggregates. And in 2000, we started looking at, because after LPG economy transition and transformed drastically, so we started targeting multiple indicators. So there was a multiple indicator approach to monetary policy in 2000s, and then all the way to the present flexible inflation targeting that we have officially adopted in 2016. So India became the 36th country in the world to officially adopt the flexible inflation targeting. And there are around 40 odd countries in the world at present, and the number is still growing, which are adopting inflation targeting as the official objective of the monetary policy. So what exactly is this flexible inflation targeting? So what
Priyanka,
happened is, yes sir.
Priyanka, your slides are not changing.
Sir, I'm not changing them. I've not changed it. So it is, the slide is monetary policy objective. Hello?
The slide is the first slide. Yes.
Now it's, yeah. Now it
Which
has
slide
changed.
is there at present?
Now it is okay. Now it has changed to monetary policy objective.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so what exactly is flexible inflation targeting? So under flexible inflation target, there's usually an explicit inflation target, which in case of India is around 4%. So whenever a monetary policy action is taken, the target is to achieve the inflation at this particular rate, which is 4%. Along with that, there is a tolerance band of plus minus 2%. So basically there is a band from 2 to 6% and the target is around 4%. So what is this tolerance band? Tolerance band is provided, and that is what gives the flexible part to this inflation targeting framework. So this tolerance band is provided to central banks so that they get the flexibility to ignore the temporary disturbances or supply shocks to the economy. So like you all know that India is still a very, this economy which is still dependent upon agriculture. A significant fraction of our consumption basket is still food items. So, and agriculture, when it's dependent upon supply side factor like monsoon, soil moisture condition, climatic changes, and so on and so forth, then the proportion and the frequency of supply shock to the economy increases. And but however, these shocks are temporary. For example, last year, onion prices within a span of 3 to 4 weeks increased by 300%. But if the policy starts responding to such temporary shocks, then it will not turn out to be fruitful. Therefore, a tolerance band is provided so that whenever there is a temporary or transitory supply shock and disturbance to the economy, we can look through that and focus on the core and focus on the fundamentals of the economy. So that is why there is this, like for example, in times of pandemic, situations are very different. There was situations of supply shock, and so inflation actually did cross 6% in 2020, but we ignored, or we tried to maintain it within the 2 to 6% band. That is how the tolerance band works. So this chart is actually showing the actual performance of the CPI inflation. The blue line is the actual CPI inflation, which is measured on a year-on-year basis. And this is how it has performed since 2012-13. We officially adopted inflation targeting in 16-17. And since then, it completely validates the success of the inflation targeting in India. Even though there were many global and domestic factors that were contributing to its success, nevertheless, it still validates that inflation targeting is going good so far in case of India. But the important thing to note here is that while India adopted inflation targeting, we had a dual mandate wherein we said that we'll maintain price stability and we'll target an inflation at 4%, but we'll keep the objective of growth in mind. So this is a sort of a dual mandate where growth cannot be ignored just to pursue the target of inflation. So to show such dual mandate, I have just shown here a very interesting chart which I've taken from a recent publication of Reserve Bank. So there is a monetary policy committee which consists of 6 members, and whenever a monetary policy which is announced 6 times a year, this monetary policy committee sits for a couple of days. They assess the economy, both domestic and global, and then they make their assessment, and then following that, a policy action is taken. So what I've done, what this particular chart is show, that is a percentage of discussion which is done on growth versus inflation. So the yellow color shows you the inflation and the green color shows you the growth. So this is the percentage of discussion which happened in the MPC, Monetary Policy Committee, since 2016. So we can see that there have been fluctuations, and if you notice that this is very much in accordance with the changing situation of the economy. So since late 2018, we have been seeing a sort of slowdown in the economy, and therefore this green part, which is the growth discussions, they have been growing in the MPC. And similarly in this part, when inflationary pressures were there, the discussions on inflations were higher. So the key point to note from this slide is no matter what's the objective of the monetary policy, the trade-off between growth and inflation will always bother any monetary economist. Okay, now next moving on to the monetary policy transmission process and how does it work. So any textbook will tell us that a monetary policy action is taken and the objective is to influence the market interest rate. Why market interest rate? Because this is the component, the interest rate is the component which determines your investment, it determines your consumption and also your government expenditures. So the C plus I plus G part of the GDP is influenced by this interest rate. So when monetary policy action is taken, it's very important to ensure the transmission to interest rate, which gets transmitted to aggregate demand, which is a very important determinant of both inflation and output. And the ultimate objective, as we discussed, of monetary policy is growth and inflation. So it's important to ensure that this transmission happens to ensure that the ultimate objective of the monetary actions are achieved. So how does it work in case of India? So as I already mentioned, monetary policy is announced 6 times a year by the RBI. So it's on a bi-monthly basis. Every 2 months, the MPC sits, decides, assess the economy and take a policy action. So policy repo rate is what is a key rate which is announced by the RBI. Along with, they provide the assessment of the domestic and the global economy in the part of the statement. So once this policy action is taken, the task of the RBI, the next task of the RBI is to manage the liquidity in the market. So why they do so? Because see, announcing the repo rate is not going to impact the investments. It's not going to affect the business houses nor the households. What impacts the business and household is the bank lending and deposit rates. So the RBI has to ensure that the policy repo rate, which only impacts the commercial banks. So through policy rate, they impacts the bank, and the bank are required to pass on that changes in the policy rate to the depositors and the lenders. So through managing liquidity, which we'll discuss in next slide, how does that happen? They ensure that the policy repo rate gets anchored to other interest rates in the economy, the money market rate, G-Sec rates, bank lending rate, and so on. This is done to ensure that the interest rate finally influence your demand and so your inflation and growth. This is a very simple basic process of monetary transmission. Now, how does it ensure, or basically how does this liquidity management happens? For that, there are various conventional and unconventional tools. The objective is to ensure anchoring of the policy repo rate with the various interest rates in the market. There are some conventional tools and some unconventional tools. We first cover the conventional tools. So this is a list of conventional tools. And I'm sure most of you must have read about it and very much know about it, but I'll just briefly cover it just so that everybody's on the same page. So firstly, CRR and SLR are very simple and mostly everybody knows it. CRR is basically the cash reserve ratio. So this is the percentage of deposit that a bank has to keep with the RBI. And this is mandatory regulation which the bank has to comply with. In case of non-compliance, there would be penalty imposed by the Reserve Bank on the banks. Okay, so this is CRR, where a percentage of bank deposits is kept with the Reserve Bank. Second is the SLR. SL is a statutory liquidity ratio, which is again a percentage of the total deposit that a bank has to keep in safe and liquid assets. For example, government securities. So banks take a percentage which is decided again by the Reserve Bank of their total deposits and keep them in government securities. So these two are mandatory and every bank has to comply with. The next is the repo rate, which is also the policy rate. So repo rate is basically the short-term rate at which Reserve banks give loans to banks. In very simple terms, whenever a bank is short of funds, they go to the RBI and ask for funds on an overnight basis. The important point to note here is that on an overnight basis, that is 24 hours. So they take that money from Reserve Bank and pay an interest, which is the repo rate, and gets that money for that one day. Similarly, whenever the bank is in excess of funds with them, they can go to the Reserve Bank, deposit the money with the Reserve Bank for one day, overnight basis, and earn an interest which is called the reserve repo rate. So repo rate is at which banks takes the money from Reserve Bank. Reverse repo is at which they can deposit their money with the Reserve Bank and earn an interest. Now the next three operations, which is the open market, operation liquidity adjustment facility, and marginal standing facility. These three are very important to understand to also appreciate the unconventional tools. And before we do so, it's important we should know that what is the role of government securities in monetary transmission. So we know that RBI is the bank to the government. But what it means is that on behalf of the government, on behalf of the central government, RBI can issue government securities to the people or to the banks and absorb or inject liquidity. So this entire process is called the open market operation. So when they basically, how does it happen? I'll give you an example. So there is a situation of high inflation in the economy. What it means is that there is excess demand or there is excess money supply in the economy, which is leading to high inflation. So what RBI should do or any central bank should do is absorb that excess liquidity. So to do so, what they can do is they can sell the government securities and absorb the money from the market. So people will buy the securities and give money back to the Reserve Bank. So what happens is money supply in the economy will fall and RBI is effectively absorbing this excess liquidity. So the demand for government securities fall, and as there is an inverse relationship between bond prices and interest rate, we would see that the interest rate would start increasing. Now, with high inflation, we are able to ensure that there is an increase in interest rate. This will reduce the demand and we are back to a situation and achieve our inflation target. So this is how the government, the Reserve Bank uses the government security to inject or absorb liquidity and ensure that the interest rate are accordingly changed and our objectives are achieved. This becomes the open market operation. Another thing to note is that government securities could be of short term or it could be of long term, and usually this is the kind of interest rate that they follow. Because for long term, there is usually a premium involved because somebody is lending you money for a longer duration, so they expect a premium. So long term interest is usually higher compared to short term interest rate on government securities. Now, the other 2 points, which is your liquidity adjustment facilities and MSF, I think we can understand that with an example. I'll take a very simple example to explain the entire process of monetary transmission. So suppose there's a bank which has a total deposit of 100 crores. So first requirement is that they have to deposit 4% of their total deposits with the Reserve Bank. So that comes out to be around 4 crore. Why 4%? Because current CRR, which is decided by the Reserve Bank, is 4%. So 4 crore is deposited by this bank with the RBI. Next is this SLR. So SLR currently has 18%. So what happens? They take 18% of this total deposit and deposit that with in safe and liquid asset, that is government securities. So 18% is deposited in government securities. Now they are remaining with 78 crores. So this 78 crore bank has to either lend, invest and earn profits for themselves. So what they do is sometimes they invest a part of that in additional government securities. So remember, this investment is made in government securities, but this is part of a regulation. This is a mandatory investment. But apart from that, what they can do is they also invest some additional amount because it's a safe and a liquid assets, and also we'll understand how this could be of use to the bank whenever they are short of funds. They can utilize it and get money. So that is why they keep some extra amount in additional government securities, and the remaining they can lend and make profits for themselves. They can lend to households, they can lend to businesses, and they can lend for investment opportunities and so on. Now, this is a simple example of how a bank usually functions. Now, where the role of RBI comes in and how RBI ensures liquidity in this picture. So, firstly, whenever this bank would be in excess of funds, suppose the bank has some extra funds available on a one-day basis where and they do not have a place to lend it. So, they can use the reserve repo window of RBI and they can park this excess fund with RBI at the reverse repo rate. So, this is how this comes into pictures. When this bank is in excess of funds, they go to reverse repo window and park this excess fund and earn an interest rate from RBI. Now, what happens if they're short of funds? So there are two windows available. Number one is your LAF, which is liquidity adjustment facility. This happens at the repo rate. But the bank has to keep their additional government securities as a collateral. So they basically at repo rate, what they were doing is they were getting funds at overnight basis. If you remember, I told you that they were getting at repo funds from the Reserve Bank at overnight rate. But in the LAF windows, they can get fund for more than 1 day. That is for 7 days or 14 days. So they can use this additional government securities, keep this as collateral and pay an interest to the Reserve Bank and get money for 7 or 14 days. Similarly, when they use the statutory liquidity ratio government securities as collateral, that becomes your MSF, which is your marginal standing facility. So the difference between MSF and LAF is MSF is done using the SLR securities and LAF is done using non-SLR securities, but the purpose is same, that your bank is short of funds, they want money, they go to RBI and borrow. So this is just a technical differences, but the idea is same, how the RBI is helping bank in meeting their shortage of funds. So this is exactly how monetary policy operation or liquidity management happen. These are the tools, the conventional tools. So we have understood that. So if there are any questions so far, we can take that up. Otherwise, I'll move forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes. Priyanka.
Yes, sir.
So,
Ma'am, what?
yeah, Naman, go ahead first. Naman, you go ahead first.
Okay, sir. Ma'am, what is the beneficiary like way for a bank to get a loan from RBI? From the repo rate, or from the MSF, or from the LAF?
What is the beneficiary way?
Way, yes, ma'am. In which it can benefit it most.
Maybe he is
Okay,
referring
okay.
to the what is the cheap source of funds.
Okay, so I'll tell you on that. See, when you go use the repo window, this is only for an overnight basis. So repo window is usually used to meet the CRR and SLR compliance. So a bank is short of funds for a day, they go to RBI and get funds for an overnight basis, meet this requirement, pay back the next day. That is your repo window, and that is done at the repo rate. LAF is whenever you are short of funds for more than one day, you want funds for 7 to 14 days, then you use this LAF window. Now, LAF window is again done at the repo rate. Okay. Now, what is more costly is this MSF, because MSF is something which the Reserve Bank is providing is in addition to already providing these two facilities. So this is a facility which was provided to ensure or ensure better liquidity management. So MSF is usually done at repo plus a penalty which at currently is 0.25%. So this is the most costly if I have to answer your question, but it depends on the needs of the bank. Sometimes this turns out to be okay given the conditions in the market, but to answer your question, this is the costly and it involves your SLR securities at deposit. Also, it cannot be done with an unlimited amount. There is some limits and conditions apply because this is something additional facility that Reserve Bank has provided to banks. So, is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. You have also answered my question, Priyanka.
Yes, ma'am.
That is only after using the LAF window completely exhausted, you can go for MSF.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's correct.
And
Okay,
Priyanka,
go ahead.
and Priyanka, the overnight borrowing, for that there is no collateral, isn't it? That
Yes.
one day borrowing, there is no collateral. Okay.
No,
No, no,
no.
I didn't get your question. Sorry.
No, for the overnight borrowing, that is the one day borrowing which you do at the repo rate, there is no collateral requirement, isn't it?
So there is.
There
There is.
is.
There is, but it only for an overnight basis. There is.
Achha, for that also there is a collateral requirement.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
You can see additional GSEC 8 crore can be used as collateral for LAF borrowing, right?
No,
Yes.
that one is for a period of time. That is for some 6 days and 14 days, etc. But for one day overnight, do they have to keep collateral?
Yes.
Huh? Huh.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Priyanka.
Okay, okay. So we have covered the conventional tools, and now let's start with the unconventional tools. So the first question is, so the thing to remember is that either of the tool, the objective is the same. So why is there a need when you already have so many conventional tools? Why have you been going into unconventional tools? So to answer that, in the pandemic times, as I mentioned, that repo rate is the policy rate. So whenever a policy is announced, the key rate to look for is the policy repo rate. So in the pandemic times, if you see, repo rate was already lowered by 115 basis point. But at the same time, because there were a lot of supply shocks and there was enormous amount of uncertainty that COVID-19 brought with it. So what happened that beyond a level, RBI cannot go further down in their policy rate. So there is a limit to which repo could be reduced beyond a point. So we have to come up with something creative and something different to ensure that the economy is churned, the boost is given to the economic activities even in times of pandemic. So do so, we try to reduce the borrowing cost and use these unconventional tools to do the same. So this is a list of unconventional monetary policy tool that the RBI has used in the recent time and basically last 2 to 3 years. Now, even though these tools are unconventional, they have always been a part of the central bank kitty. So we call them unconventional, because they did not traditionally take a front seat in helping central banks around the world, including RBI, to achieve its monetary policy target. But while we are calling them unconventional, it's very important to remember that many central banks around the world have used these tools in the past to conduct their monetary policy since the global financial crisis. So these tools have been in use. It depends on the situation. So RBI has tried to use these tools in the recent past. So the way the unconventional monetary tool work is twofold. Firstly, it tries to influence the long-term interest rate. Now, why long-term interest rate matter? Because if you look at the components of your aggregate demand, your investment, consumption, they all are determined by your long-term interest rate to a great extent. So, in one way, this unconventional tool works is by targeting the long-term interest rate, and we'll discuss that in further slides. How does that happen? And second, they try to reduce the uncertainty which is going on in the market, particularly with respect to the future of interest rate. So with these two tools, it tries to bring in a sense of certainty in the market and ensure that borrowing cost is reduced and there's a economic activity, a boost is given to the economic activities. So the first in the list is the forward guidance. So forward guidance is one when central bank communicates about its future plan for monetary policy. So for example, the RBI might indicate to the market that it will not raise repo rate until it achieves a target of growth of say 5 to 6%. So unless GDP growth rate increases to 5 or 6%, RBI tells to the market that it is not going to change the repo rate. So this becomes your state-based forward guidance, where the monetary policy commits to a particular monetary policy until a specific state of the economy is reached. Now, there could be a time-based forward guidance as well, where the policy is committing, the central bank is committing to a monetary policy until a specific point in time. So, for example, they say that for next 2 years, we will not change the repo rate. So, RBI in October 2020 decided to use this forward guidance, and this is the exact statement taken from the monetary policy statement, which says that RBI decided to continue with the accommodative stance as long as necessary, at least during the current financial year and into the next financial year, to revive growth on a durable basis and mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. So when such a statement is passed, it's sort of provide a guidance to the market that they need not worry about an increase in interest rate, and they can bring in necessary changes in their actions. So how does it actually help? To understand that, let's look at the risk-free yield curve. So this is usually a yield curve which is lower at the shorter maturity and increases with larger maturity. So this is a risk-free simple yield curve. So what happens when a forward guidance is given? RBI can intervene here. So it basically this curve is suggesting that in future the interest rate are going to increase. This is what the market understand by looking at this curve. Now here the RBI can intervene and they can provide forward guidance about its plan, its monetary policy plans on repo rate and obviously on other market rates, that they will not gonna change it. So when they provide such forward guidance, it sort of influence the expectations of the market player, and in turn affects the shape of this yield curve. So what happens is that this yield curve can flatten given the announcement of forward guidance given by the central bank. So the objective is that we want to reduce the rate of interest so that an economic activities gets the stimulus. So with forward guidance, when RBI commits to a particular monetary policy, they are ensuring that they will not change the interest rate. So it will flatten this curve. So, if this is the curve, it shows a sharp increase. If this is a curve, it shows that it will take time for rate of interest to increase. So that provides sort of certainty to the market players. Okay, so this is how forward guidance actually works in principle. A second operation, which is the operation twist, and this one also got a lot of limelight in the media, probably because of its name and an interesting twist that it provides to the yield curve. So under Operation Twist, it's very simple. RBI simultaneously bought long-term government securities and sold same amount of short-term government securities in the markets. So on one hand, they are buying. Earlier, we discussed that either they absorb liquidity or they inject liquidity. So what are they trying to do here? They're doing both. They are buying the bonds, government bonds, and they're selling the bonds the same amount. So this is not absorption or injection of liquidity. That is not going to happen here. So what will happen here is a change or a twist that would be given to the yield curve. The rationale for this policy is, or Operation Twist is, the RBI is trying to lower the long-term interest rate. Why long-term interest rate? Because long-term interest rate brings more investment, more consumption. It stimulates the demand, stimulates the supply. So we are interested in lowering the long-term interest rate in the economy. And at the same time, when the policy was made, the short-term interest rate was very low. Now, what is the problem with low short-term interest rate? The problem with low short-term interest rate is when people try to look out for investment avenues and they see that the interest rate is low, they try to look for arbitrage at some other places. They try to look for leverage at some other places. So there is a tendency whenever your short-term interest rate is lower that your currency or your money from domestic money is tend to go out of the country. So to stop that outflow, the RBI decided to target both the things together with this Operation Twist. They tried to increase the short-term interest rate and lower the long-term interest rate so that they can, one, stimulate the economy by lowering the long-term interest rate, and second, stop the outflow of funds from going out of India. So this is a rationale for Operation Twist, and this is how the intention is to work like that. You want to increase the short-term yield curve and you want to lower the yield curve, and the result will ensure that these two will happen. And Operation Twist was not one-time thing. It was done in phases so that a credibility is established over time, and efficient results are ensured. Intended results are ensured. Okay, so last in the list of unconventional tool which was used by the RBI recent time is the long-term repo operation. So as we discussed, repo operation is usually for less than a year. It's a short-term operation adopted by the Reserve Bank. But in long-term repo operation, what RBI is doing is that it announced that it would make repurchase contracts on government securities of 1 year and 3-year maturities as well. And this would be done at the repo rate. So when this is done at the repo rate, and these are long-term securities, securities of long-term maturities, so usually policy rate is the lower than the government yield, usually. So what happens is that whenever such an announcement is made, it creates arbitrage opportunities for the banks and other financial institutions which are holding excess government bonds. So they can borrow, they can lend, and earn that difference in interest rate. So there's a difference in interest rate. This provides it arbitrage opportunities to the bank to earn that money. And when they do that, it brings down the yield of government and corporate bonds. And this is the intention. When we want to stimulate the economy, usually most of the bond rates are anchored to government rates. So when we are trying to bring down the yields on government and corporate bonds, our objective is met. It reduces the lending rate benchmark to government bonds, and our job is done. So this is how long-term repo operations are planned. So when we look at the impact of these policies, I've just taken a basic table from the RBI publications. It compares the rates on corporate bonds between March 26, 2020 and a year later in February 26, 2021. So we can see that throughout the list, there has been a monetary transmission. The RBI intended to reduce the policy rate, and this has been achieved. You can see that across the categories of corporate bond, there has been a reduction in rate by these variations. So this validates that the monetary transmission we were able to achieve the monetary transmission process. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions, you can ask.
Yes, now the floor is open for questions on this topic. Once this is complete, she will be interacting with you all regarding career and related matters. You can switch on your mic and ask the question. Yes, Navya.
Priyanka?
Yes, sir.
Priyanka, I'm
Yes, sir.
Krishna Kumar. Yes.
Yes, sir.
I just want to just explain a little bit about this process of bond purchases. Usually, the process of bond purchases which happens has been largely of the government bond purchases. So, in the Western economies, also we have now started seeing that there has been a large amount of long-term corporate bonds which have also been purchased. So, in
Yes, sir.
our country, also, I heard that something like that had happened in the context of the recent unconventional monetary policies. Could you just say something about that?
Sir, I am not very sure about that. You're referring with respect to corporate bonds, right?
Has there been any initiative in our country also with respect to purchase of
Sir,
long-term
as
corporate?
far I know, if even if it's there, it's of very limited extent. So the market is not very well established in case of India, and as far as my knowledge is concerned, it has not happened to any significant extent.
Yeah,
I
Priyanka.
think that
In
particularly there's a pleasure hearing you, and particularly there's more than a pleasure hearing that an article written by
So
one of
your
the
voice is breaking.
yeah, yeah, sorry, I'll take I'll write it in the chat post.
Oh,
yeah,
okay, sir.
Okay.
what I understand is, Priyanka, in Western countries, the unconventional monetary policies mostly in the form of central bank purchasing, private bonds.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir.
If
Yes, sir.
you see the Federal Reserve's, unconventional monetary policy during 2008-9 financial crisis when you were in Venkateshwara, right? So
Yes,
Federal
sir.
Reserve bought huge amount of, the private bonds.
Correct, correct.
Uh, and that way it pumped in liquidity and saved the financial system and the real economy from further going down. So I think if I understand Dr. Krishna's question, he was talking of unconventional of that type. Is it happening in India, going to happen in India?
Okay, okay, okay. So I'm not aware of that because I've not read anywhere about that.
Yes, yes, even I
Maybe,
haven't heard RBI saying such things that they are going to buy
Yeah.
private bonds.
Priyanka, apart from that, am I audible now?
it's better, sir.
I'm very happy that you are here. And
Thank you,
particularly,
sir.
it was all the more happy when I read the particular article which you had co-authored with another Venkateshwara College student, if I remember, Sarthak Gulati,
Sarthak Gulati,
on
right?
on
Demographic.
distribution. That was on demographic, but I think the article which I read was on distributional implications of monetary policy, which is an important concern of worldwide central bankers.
That
And
is
it's
with
the
someone else.
someone else, yeah, because I think this is the article which I read. And that
You
article
read.
had I've read that article, and particularly the graph which basically speaks about the very, very low amount of funds which goes to small borrowers, etc. You have done an excellent
Right.
work there, and
Thank
also
you, sir.
a nice hearing from you. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, any questions from our students, economics honors final year students? Okay, about the cryptocurrencies, etc., the digital currencies. Okay,
Uh,
Priyanka, I think yes.
sir,
Anyone?
I have one question. This is Vinay here.
Vinay,
I,
Vinay.
I'm yes, sir. I'm an ex-student.
Yeah, Vinay Krishna, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Vinay Krishna passed out, I think, 2017, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Vinay, please pose your question.
Ma'am, my question is on the crude oil, the prices of petrol. There is a controversy between RBI and the government on RBI saying that petrol prices are more relevant for inflation control. So, what would be your comment on that?
Comment on. Sorry, I didn't get
On
that.
this petrol price debate between RBI and the government. where the RBI is saying that petrol prices are what is causing inflation, the major
See,
component.
this debate has always been going on because petrol prices is what gives taxes to the government, but
Right.
it's a pain for the central banker because it only is leading to, and petrol prices not just, it leads to fuel inflation. Petrol prices also passed on, and it is persistent because it gets transferred to your transportation cost, then it goes into your food inflation, and it becomes persistent. So
Right.
it's a big
Right.
pain for any central banker, and especially when you're targeting inflation. So that debate will always continue. Like, central government has their own views, and state government have their own views on the taxes. I don't think
Right.
this could ever have a solution
Got it.
unless you make everything market driven, and that has not happened.
Right.
Yeah, I think, if you recall, when in intermediate macroeconomics one, there is a chapter in aggregate supply section, how
Yes,
oil
sir.
prices, impact the aggregate supply, right?
Yeah.
India particularly, 80% of its oil requirements are met from imports. Now you
Right.
see
Right.
oil prices globally, they are picking up. If I see yesterday's Brent crude oil prices, they are trading at $79 per barrel.
Ah,
Okay. And
right.
government of India, due to this pandemic and due to closure of economic activities, it had dependent upon this oil, and they have increased the cess several times.
Right.
And as Priyanka said, that has a direct impact on inflation and also indirect impact, because oil prices have a weightage in the CPI and as well as WPI, the fuel component. And also oil, it feeds into several activities, like think of agriculture, think of
Yeah.
agriculture activities like use of a tractor to plow the land. Obviously, the cost is going to go up.
Right.
Yeah, so there is little that RBI can do with regard to this. It is the government which has to take a call on the cess that is being presently collected around rupees 20 rupees. Only cess part is just rupees 20 on petrol. In
Right.
addition to central excise duty, in addition to customs duty, and in addition to what is called the state level VAT or sales tax.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes. Any other questions? If you have no other questions, we will open the floor. Priyanka, I think she would give some another 10 minutes time, to speak to you all with regard to, various career choices. If you have any questions about how to go about higher studies, etc. Yes. Now the floor is open for, interaction with her on career related matters. Yeah, let me start, with Priyanka. After you pass out in 2011 from DSC, so you
Yes,
joined in corporate, right?
yes. I
What
got
has
yeah.
been, yeah, so you continuously worked in the same firm for 3 years?
No, no, I just work there. So basically, I got campus placement because I have some actuaries, actuarial science papers before I was in D school. So in D school, we have this option of campus placement, and so I got into I got into Deloitte Consulting as an actuarial analyst, and I continued there for about 1 year only. And then I joined as assistant professor in Delhi University for another 1 year. And then in around 14, I joined Reserve Bank.
So you worked also as a teacher. Which college is that?
That is Ramanujan College.
Oh, Ramanujan College. Okay, very good. So you have had, three roles: being
Yes.
an employee in corporate sector and being an academician. Now you are a central banker. So
Yes, sir.
have you ever had any difficulty in deciding, which course of action you have to take? Obviously, when you passed out from Venkateshwara, we all were sure you will go for MA, right?
Yes, sir.
And your hard work and your luck, made you to join in DSC. You passed out from there. Thereafter, when you got a campus placement, so you decided to join without any second thought.
Yes.
Okay. And then why you shifted to a teaching? What made you to shift to teaching?
Sir, actually, it was like my profile was in actuarial as an actuarial analyst. So personally, I found that to be a bit monotonous job. That was the only reason, and because there were certain set models that you have to go through. The company was nice, the pay was nice, and in actuarial, the career prospects are also very good. And some people are actually take it very. It's very exciting career prospect that actuarial science provides you, but for me, I found that thing a bit monotonous and I was sort of missing economics. So I just wanted to come back to this field because in actuarial science, it's totally stats, maths, and modeling and programming. So I just wanted to come back to economics because I have done my master's and I have some good interest in the subject. So initially, I thought of getting into academics, but academics I could not find anything, with good future career prospects were missing. I found it there because I wanted to be in Delhi, and at that time, so in Delhi University, because those prospects were missing, so I decided to change it to central banking, and luckily cleared RBI. Since then, it's continuing.
Yes. So when you were teaching here, so you qualified NET, that means.
Yes.
Oh, that is great. You didn't mention. So she also has a qualification of National Eligibility Test, which is a mandatory qualification to be a teacher in the colleges and universities.
Right.
Right. So in 2014, you have appeared for the RBI Grade B.
Right.
And how many were qualified in that exam in that year?
9 of us.
9 of you.
9.
Okay, okay. And you soon decided to join once you got the call letter for joining.
Sorry, sir?
You have decided to join in RBI thereafter.
Right, sir.
Okay. And I must mention in 2008, RBI came up with the internship scheme.
Right.
And Priyanka was one of the, I think, 2 or 3 people who qualified for RBI
3.
internship.
Hmm.
Yeah, 3 people. So that was a very big, achievement as an undergraduate student, because RBI came up with that scheme, and at that time, UG students were eligible to sit for that entrance exam and
Right.
qualify for internship. But now they have increased the level of eligibility.
Right.
Given that there are,
Masters.
yes, masters. Given that now there are thousands and lakhs of people coming with undergraduate degree, they have increased the eligibility to masters. So they were all very lucky enough to get an internship opportunity with RBI. I believe you worked in RBI Delhi.
No, sir, Lucknow.
Acha, you went to Lucknow. Okay,
I actually
good.
did that internship twice. So next year,
Twice.
after final year, I did it in Delhi.
Delhi. Oh, that means from D school also you went.
No, in between my D school and final year, I did it for 2 months.
Okay, okay, good, very good. Yes. I expect some of you to ask some questions. Navya and Naman.
Ma'am, so I had a question.
Yeah.
So, since you are you're working at RBI right now, could you share a little about what does your typical day look like? What kind of work are you expected to do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. So, I am in the Research and Economic Policy Department, and if I mention, see, the most important work that we have to carry out is research. So we are supposed to carry out research work, publish paper, publish articles on a regular basis. So this is an ongoing work because we are researchers, we are economists. So doing research is our primary work. The next job is definitely the monetary policy. So monetary policy is announced every 2 months. So once the policy ends, we just get a break of say 10-15 days in which we carry out our research and other work. And then the cycle of the working and preparing analysis and going for primary surveys, all of this starts from after 15 days of the announcement of the policy for the next policy. So usually, like I am currently for last 2 years, I am in this agriculture division. So some of my key works that I have to carry on a very frequent basis is we try to look for we go to firstly we in terms of primary service, a lot of times we go to the agriculture mandis, like because I'm posted in Maharashtra, and Maharashtra is the largest producer of onion. And onion, if you know, is the most irritating commodity in the food basket that causes huge fluctuations in the inflation every year, or at least every alternate year. So onion is something which is very troublemaker for the RBI. So what we do is we go to these mandis, we talk to farmers, we talk to traders, and we talk to aggregators in the mandi and village level, because Maharashtra is the largest producer, and within Maharashtra, Nasik is the largest district, where Lasalgaon is the largest market in the Asia for onions. So we go to such markets for different commodities, those commodities which is critical for the inflation point of view. So this is one part of the job, that we try to understand what is going on ground, because there is secondary data available which government is releasing on inflation, but to get the sense of the ground, to get the sense of what is happening at the farmers level, what is the prices they are getting, and how things are working from wholesale to retail level, to understand this picture, we frequently visit the mandis. This is one important part that we carry out on a bi-monthly or at least quarterly basis. The other task that we do is we regularly look at the developments in both domestic and global economy that could affect different aspects of in Indian economy. Like when you are in agriculture, you look from that perspective, and there are different divisions in RBI. So someone is looking at external trade, someone is looking at agriculture, someone is looking at prices, someone is looking at cryptocurrency and digital payments. So there are different divisions. So all of these divisions try to regularly monitor developments in global and domestic economy and analyze that and puts up note to the top management. So for top management, to us is the governor and the deputy governors of the Reserve Bank. So we regularly try to put up and update them and provide our analytical view and reports on different aspects of the economy. So this is another important task that we carry out. Then third important task is the data. So if you've seen the RBI website anytime, it provides one of the most credible, efficient and systematic source of data on Indian economy. So someone has to work on that, and that is one part of our job, to update and keep this data in place. That's another thing that we do. And apart from that, there are regular research work, policy notes on different topics that we do. Like if there is some increase in GDP, fall in GDP, anything, any disturbance, any supply shock happens, we analyze them, we put up a note. So this is regular work that we do. But prominently, these are the 3-4 things that we do on a daily basis. I hope I answered your question.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it has been very exhaustive answer. Vinay, you want to ask something to Priyanka? Vinay Krishna.
I had the same question, sir.
Vinay.
I had the same question as Navya, but I also wanted to ask how different Mumbai is from Delhi on a lighter note.
Yeah, before she answers that question, Priyanka, Vinay is preparing for Indian Economic Service exam as well.
Okay, nice.
So I think RBI Grade B will be equally good.
Yes, sir.
So kindly provide him any guidance if you can.
You are from Delhi, Vinay?
Yeah, I'm from Delhi.
Then you're gonna miss Delhi forever, because I have been living in Mumbai for I think close to 7 years now, and I still miss Delhi. Mumbai is good. Mumbai is pretty good city. It has all the facilities. Everyone is very professional. Everyone, starting from any services you take here, everyone, auto wala, the domestic help that you get, people in office, everyone is very professional. People are very nice here. So in terms of comfort that you get in this city, it's pretty good, and facilities you get is pretty good, opportunities you get is pretty good, and the fun factor is also good. You have all sort of restaurants, you have all sort of places to go to on weekends. All those things are there, but home is home. So in that sense, I still miss Delhi, and particularly the food of Delhi you will find nowhere in India. So
yeah, Vinay is very much interested in public service like you, Priyanka.
okay, sir.
So I hope
I'm actually Sir, I'm in that dilemma. I'm currently at Citibank. I got placed from campus. So the whole corporate government pros and cons weighing is happening at this point.
You see, Priyanka is the live example how she was
Yeah.
able to sail through, three sectors: corporate, academics, and to public service.
Right.
Right.
It's a very personal choice actually, because I have friends from D school who are very happy in the corporate, but I was struggling each day in my
Yeah.
private sector job. So leaving that was very easy for me. Leaving DU was still difficult for me because I enjoy teaching in Delhi University, but leaving private was still very easy for me. But I know people who, because they are different, it's very different when you working in a government organization compared to working in a private organization. There's stark difference that you would notice in everything, from the pay difference is definitely there, but that it's not an issue after a few years. But otherwise also, in terms of the productivity, the contribution that you can make, it differs a lot. So it's totally a personal choice. Nobody can guide on that thing.
Yes. So, what are your future plans, Priyanka?
Sir, right now I'm planning for a PhD, so still to explore on that. But I'll continue in the research, or I might switch to academic. That I'm still exploring. But PhD would be the first step that I would take in coming 2 to 3 years.
Yes, I
That
think
is the
that should
plan.
be your immediate, aim. I have seen people shifting from RBI to academics as well.
Yes, sir.
There was one Dr. Amresh
Yeah.
Samantrai.
Okay.
I mentioned about him to you. Uh, After working for, I think, around 12, 13 years in RBI, he joined
Okay.
now Pondicherry University as a professor.
Okay.
So
Many people do.
yes, you have that option open. I wish, Sri Venkateswara College Department of Economics has been there for last 40 years. Okay. To my knowledge, and not even one of our alumnus have become faculty in Delhi School of Economics.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So we
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of hopes on you. To be a professor, you need not be a teacher prior to it. What you need is only 10 papers, a publication in reputed journals.
Okay. Okay.
You need
Thanks
just
for
10
that.
papers. I will share
Okay.
with you the qualification required for a professor.
Okay, sir.
So you have all ingredients to be again a teacher back. Yes. Yes. So
And
if
Ma'am,
yes,
yeah.
please.
ma'am, Ariman had a question. He is facing some technical issues, so I'll be posing his question. His
Sure.
question is that has your role changed from the pre-COVID and post-COVID times? Has there been any change in your job role because of the pandemic?
Uh, we got work from home, which was not there with RBI before. So that is one thing. And definitely, see, in terms of analysis, these shocks, we have done shock analysis before, because it constitute one of the prominent things that we do, that we need to understand what is affecting the economy. But COVID-19 has came out as something which nobody ever expected, and nobody was ever prepared for it. So in that sense, we have to understand the health issues. We have to understand the health economy, and in that sense, we have to update on our information and understanding and knowledge. But other than that, things have been smooth. Nothing as such has changed post COVID.
Right. Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, I had a question.
Hmm.
Ma'am, so I'm a second year student. So, as a
Okay.
second year student, what do you think, or what do you suggest uh, that what measures I should take so as to, get into a government service as such?
What measures?
Yeah, what measures or what
Uh,
things can be done?
Okay,
What
so
preparations to take in that?
no, you have to decide first what government service you are looking for. Like if you're looking for civil services, the preparation would be very different. And if you're looking for a job like RBI or IES, preparation would be different. But
Not for RBI or IES.
but if you're not decided, I can even give you an option for that. That if you're still thinking, what I felt, because I also tried for government jobs after leaving Deloitte, and one thing I found missing, and I wished I would have done is start updating on your information, like reading newspapers, make it like something you have to do on an everyday basis, and start reading a lot. I think that would really help. So if you have good knowledge, you can, even if you decide after 2 to 3 years where you want to go, things would be smooth. Because if you have to start from scratch once, because in this age when you are around early 20s, or you know you and cannot decide, no matter how much some guidance somebody provides. What I've realized is it's only like after 24, 25 you understand what you really want. So for that you should be prepared. Keep yourself prepared. Wherever you go, you should be prepared for that. That should be the strategy. So update yourself and read a lot. And definitely, when you're studying in college, we take it very lightly, but these studies actually help you throughout your life. If there are some papers that I just took very lightly in D school, and I still regret that, because now I'm working as an economist, and I need every bit of that, and I can't just go back and look through my books. So the best suggestion would be take your 3 years in BA and 2 years if you do MBA or masters or whichever degree. Take it seriously. Do it seriously, then things would get sorted.
Yeah, that's a very, very good message, Priyanka. Probably you never thought agriculture would be important for you. Now you are doing agriculture research.
Usually,
Yes,
right.
yes,
That's
that's a
true.
very, very important message she has sent. Don't think that I like micro, so I will put so much effort in micro and neglect other papers.
Because you
What she
never
said,
know.
yes, you never know where you will end up. So you have to give importance to each and every paper as per the requirement. Number one. Number two, when Priyanka passed out in 2009, in the history of economics department, the biggest ever batch was her batch. Am I right, Priyanka?
Yes, sir.
You had 75 or 80. I'm not able to recall. That's the biggest batches we have had. Yes.
So,
And even the present batch also 2021, also very big batch. There were 80 people in the present batch as well. Yes. Yes. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yeah, I think there are no other questions. Now I would suggest Navya, you can propose vote of thanks. Navya.
Yes, sir. Uh,
Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for gracing us with your presence. It was a very informative session. I'm sure all of us learned quite a lot from the session and from your experience as well. So, thank you, ma'am, for sparing us some time. And thank you to all the attendees and all the teachers who have been a part of this session. Thank you so much.
In fact, the presentation on the monetary pulse has been quite technical, and it shows your understanding of the entire monetary policy process. It has been very enriching for us as well. We do
thank
teach
you, sir.
money and financial markets. It has been a very good learning experience to us as well. And on behalf of the Department of Economics, Sri Venkateswara College, we thank you very much for giving us your time. And
Thank you,
kindly
sir.
share your address with Navya. We will send you a small gift of token of appreciation for your contribution to today's talk. Yes, I think Dr. Krishna wants to say something.
Hello, sir. Good to see you.
Please,
I
please,
think you're mute.
please
So you're
unmute.
mute.
Yeah. No, thank
Unmute.
you so much, Priyanka. I have already said what I wanted to say when I asked you a question. It's a great pleasure. And I did not know about this Ramanujan part of the story. Other parts I was following because I knew that you were in RBI and all. But about the teaching at Ramanujan College, I was not aware of that fact. I was just switching on the video because now the convention is that after the meeting is over, there is some photograph.
Right.
Yes, everyone switch on your video.
Okay.
Everyone switch
Also,
on your
your sense
video.
of humor is also very good. And onion is the vegetable which makes the RBI people cry. And that's not bad.
Not just RBI. Every household, person who is working in kitchen.
Yeah.
Even sometimes
Yeah.
I do cut, onion and I have to cry.
But that one we can put some water and cut. Then I think with the scope.
Yeah. My wife gives the same solution. Yes, please switch on everyone your video. We'll have some good snaps for making our report. Yeah. Who is taking pictures, Suraj?
Yes, sir. I am taking the pictures.
Oh, you are taking. Okay, take several pictures. Capture all of them.
Just a second. Just one more picture.
Yeah, I think Meenakshi also joined with her video. Okay, Suraj?
Sir, I was facing a small issue. Extremely sorry. Just a second.
Okay, take your time, but don't miss the pictures, okay?
No, sir. I won't.
Yes. Someone also can try simultaneously from the organizing team.
I think they have
Sir, I've taken a few pictures.
Very good.
Yeah, then it's fine.
Got it, sir. Thank you, sir.
And okay, thank you very much, Priyanka, once again.
Thank you so
Navya,
much, sir.
kindly take her details later.
Ma'am, I'll contact you. You can share your address
Sure.
details.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. See you.